Today we're going to talk a little bit about the potato, touch on its history, its current situation in the global food market, and speculate a bit about the future of the potato as a source of food for the world population. So the potato is native to South America and was introduced into world food systems during the Columbian Exchange. It's mainly used directly as food and will occasionally be processed into food items such as flour or alcohol. The current trade patterns put France and Germany as the big exporters of potatoes as of 2017, and Belgium and the Netherlands as the big importers of potatoes also as of 2017. However, in terms of actual production, China and India produce more potatoes than anyone else. However, based on imports and exports, they appear to be more or less self-sufficient, and so there's not a lot of importing or exporting going on between those countries. Potatoes are usually more tillage intensive due to the fact that potatoes, especially compared to many other crops, have very unique needs, especially because they need to have a certain kind of internal irrigation furrows within the fields themselves. They need to have soil aeration. The beds need to be prepared differently than, say, wheat or maize. And so oftentimes tilling allows the sort of mounds to be built up, the potatoes are planted in, and also to have the nearby irrigation so that water can be removed from the soil in order that it doesn't become too moist. Which kind of leads us into some of the common diseases that potatoes will often face, because especially in terms of bacterial and fungal diseases, a lot of the kind of causes of potatoes getting these particular infections comes from if the ground is too moist, and also if it's too warm, since potatoes tend to prefer a much cooler and moist but not too moist system. So some bacterial infections include bacterial ring rot, blackleg or soft rot, and the common scab. And then fungal issues include black scurf and gray mold. Once again, oftentimes these occur when the soil is too wet and also too warm. Some viruses include potato virus A, X, and Y. And some insects that will cause damage to potato crops include aphids and the Colorado potato beetle. Some of the issues there include not just those pests physically eating leaves and causing disruption to the plant itself, but also potentially carrying viruses or other infections on them, and then kind of having that as a way for those diseases to be transported to the plant itself. So as I touched on before, the sort of preferred conditions are cool, more or less dry soil with lots of nutrients. Potatoes require a large intake of nutrients and organic matter in order to be able to grow. This is reflected in the fact that potatoes themselves are very nutrient dense and also have many other micronutrients and other things that you wouldn't necessarily expect from your more standard crops like maize or wheat. And then the current yields in the main areas, that would be China and India. For China, it's about 180,000 hexagrams per hectare. And in India, it's about 220,000 hectograms per hectare. So you can see that India has a bit better yield, even though China has somewhat higher for production total, but not too far off there. As you can see from these graphs, the yield in these countries has both been going up. China, especially in the last 10 years, has had very consistent growth year to year. But looking back at the 20-year longevity of trends, then you can see that there's a little bit more variation, but still on average, yields have been going up. So this also would kind of indicate that the future potatoes will probably see potatoes featuring more heavily, or at least not less heavily, in the global diet as the kind of supply and demand of them continues to rise based on this data here. In terms of yield potential, within China and India, because there is such variety in the soil conditions and the climatic conditions within these countries, there wasn't any comprehensive assessment of yield potential in these countries. So it's hard to determine exactly what the yield gap would be and how much more potential there is for yield to be increased. So looking kind of long-term more speculatively, potatoes are a really good source of carbohydrates. They're very starchy, and they also have a lot of nutrients, such as like potassium and vitamin C. So for these reasons, in addition to the fact that production has been continuously increasing in the major growing areas for the last 20 years, it would appear that potatoes, while they're already well within the top 10 crops worldwide, should continue to be of great importance in the global diet and in global food systems.